The first thing people noticed was not the billionaire's tailored coat or the quiet power in the way he stood. It was the small hand clutching the edge of his sleeve, trembling as if it might disappear if it let go. The street was loud with morning traffic, horns slicing through the cold air, yet somehow the moment felt painfully still. He looked down, surprised, and met the eyes of a girl who couldn't have been more than 11. One shoe hung loosely from her foot, the sole peeling away like a tired smile. The other foot was bare, red from the winter pavement. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply looked at him with a seriousness that felt far too heavy for her age and said, "Sir, I need school shoes. I will pay you back. I promise." For a heartbeat, the billionaire, Adrian Hale, a name that ruled boardrooms and headlines, thought he had misheard her. People begged him for things all the time. They begged with rehearsed tears, with anger, with entitlement. But this was different. This was a vow, not a plea. He glanced around instinctively, half expecting a camera or a setup. There was none. Just a bus stop, a cracked sidewalk, and a girl whose spine was straight despite the cold cutting through her thin sweater. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice lower than usual, as if afraid to frighten her away. "Lena," she replied immediately. "I'm late already." "Late for what?" "School." She swallowed, then added, as if it explained everything, "Today is presentation day." Adrian frowned. Presentation day meant standing in front of classmates, teachers, maybe parents. He looked again at her feet. "Why don't you have shoes?" "I did," Lena said. "But they broke. Yesterday." She lifted the loose shoe slightly to show him. "I tried to fix them with tape, but the teacher said I can't come inside like this. She said rules are rules." A car door slammed nearby. Adrian felt an odd pressure in his chest, something he usually silenced with logic or money. "And you think I can help?" "Yes." She nodded once, firmly. "You look like someone who keeps promises." The words hit him harder than any negotiation ever had. He almost laughed at the absurdity of it, this child judging him not by his wealth, but by something invisible. "And how exactly do you plan to pay me back?" he asked, more curious than skeptical. Lena hesitated, then reached into her backpack. She pulled out a small, wrinkled notebook and flipped it open. Inside were careful columns of numbers written in pencil. "I earn money after school," she said. "I clean tables at my uncle's cafe. Sometimes I help neighbors carry groceries. I can give you $5 every month." Adrian stared at the notebook. The numbers were small, but the discipline behind them was enormous. "Shoes cost more than that," he said gently. "I know." Her voice wavered for the first time. "But I will keep paying. Even when I'm big. I don't forget my debts." A bus roared past, wind whipping her hair across her face. Adrian suddenly remembered his own childhood, memories he rarely visited, of worn shoes and a mother who stitched them late into the night, whispering apologies to feet that couldn't hear her. He had sworn back then that he would never feel that helpless again. "Come with me," he said. Lena's grip tightened instantly. "To the store?" "Yes." She nodded, relief flashing across her face before she masked it with determination. "Thank you, sir. I will remember this." They walked 2 blocks to a modest shoe store, the kind Adrian would never normally enter. The clerk looked confused when she recognized him, then more confused when he gestured for Lena to sit. Lena chose carefully, testing each pair as if making a lifelong decision. When she finally smiled, it was small but radiant, as though her world had quietly expanded. As Adrian paid, Lena stood beside him, counting the bills with her eyes. "How much?" she asked. "Don't worry about it," he replied automatically. Her smile faded. "No. Please tell me." He hesitated, then named a number far smaller than his actual wealth could justify worrying about. Lena nodded and wrote it down in her notebook immediately. I will start next month. Outside, she bent down and tied the laces, standing taller when she finished. I have to go now, she said. If I'm late again, they won't let me present. Adrian handed her his card without thinking. If you need anything. She shook her head quickly. Only shoes. I already have those. She paused, then added softly, but thank you for not laughing. As she ran toward the school, Adrian watched until she disappeared through the gates. He should have left then. He had a meeting in 20 minutes, a deal worth millions waiting on his signature. Yet his feet didn't move. Something about the way Lena had spoken, about debt, about promises, echoed in his mind like an unfinished sentence. If this story already has your heart, take a second right now to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this only get deeper from here. Adrian turned to go, but a voice stopped him. Mr. Hale. He turned back. The shoe store clerk stood in the doorway, pale. That girl, she comes here sometimes. She looks at the shoes but never asks. Last week she tried to measure her feet on the floor with a piece of string. Adrian felt his throat tighten. Does she come alone? Yes. Always. The image burned into him, a child measuring hope with string. He nodded his thanks and walked away, but the city looked different now. Every polished window reflected a version of himself he wasn't sure he recognized. Hours later, during the meeting, numbers blurred on the screen. Adrian's phone vibrated. An unknown number. He ignored it once. Then again. Finally, irritated, he stepped out to answer. Sir. Lena's voice, breathless. I found your card in my pocket. I didn't mean to call, but something happened. His heart skipped. Are you all right? I don't know, she said quietly. They asked me questions. About you. And now the principal wants to see me again tomorrow. The line went silent for a moment, heavy with unspoken fear. Adrian stared out at the glass towers surrounding him, realizing that a simple act, buying a pair of shoes, had already begun to ripple in ways he couldn't control. Adrian pressed the phone closer to his ear as if distance itself were the problem. Slow down, he said, keeping his voice steady even though something sharp had lodged itself in his chest. What kind of questions? They asked how I know you, Lena replied. He could hear the echo of a hallway behind her, footsteps passing, doors opening and closing. They asked if you're my father or my uncle. I told them no. I told them the truth. And what did you tell them the truth was? That I asked you for shoes, she said simply. And you bought them. And that I promised to pay you back. Adrian closed his eyes. In his world, generosity was often mistaken for strategy, kindness for manipulation. He had spent years navigating that confusion, but never had it reached a child. Did anyone say you were in trouble? No, Lena said, though the hesitation betrayed her. But they looked at me like I did something wrong. Like I cheated. You didn't, Adrian said firmly. Listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong. There was a pause, then a quiet question that nearly broke him. Are you in trouble? He almost smiled at the irony. No, I'm not. Okay, she whispered, as if that was enough to settle the universe. They said I can go now. But tomorrow, they want to talk again. Tomorrow I'll come with you, Adrian said without thinking. Silence. Then, you don't have to, Lena said quickly. I can explain. I know you can, he replied. But sometimes adults don't listen as well as they should. I'll be there. Another pause, longer this time. Okay, she said, and for the first time since the call began, her voice sounded lighter. Thank you. The call ended, leaving Adrian staring at his reflection in the glass wall of the corridor. The man looking back at him wore a tailored suit and a controlled expression, but behind his eyes was a storm he hadn't felt in years. He returned to the meeting, signed the papers without reading them, and left early, ignoring the confused looks from his executives. That night, sleep refused to come. He found himself wondering where Lena lived, how she got to school every day, whether she ate enough. Questions multiplied, each one exposing a part of the city he had trained himself not to see. By morning, his decision was already made. The school was older than he expected, its brick walls faded, its gates chipped and noisy. Children streamed inside in clusters, backpacks bouncing, laughter spilling into the street. Adrian stood near the entrance, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked. When Lena spotted him, her eyes widened, then she smiled and ran over, stopping just short of hugging him. "You came," she said. "I said I would." She nodded seriously, as if adding another point to an invisible list titled Reasons to Trust Him. Together they walked inside. The principal's office smelled of paper and disinfectant. A woman in her 40s sat behind the desk, her posture polite but guarded. "Mr. Hale," she said, rising halfway before sitting back down. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," Adrian replied. "I understand there were concerns." The principal folded her hands. "We noticed Lena's new shoes. When asked, she mentioned your name. You must understand how that sounds." "I do," Adrian said calmly. "Which is why I'm here. There's nothing inappropriate about it. She asked for help. I helped." "With money," the principal added. "With shoes," Adrian corrected gently. "For school." The principal glanced at Lena, who stood straight beside Adrian, her chin lifted. "Lena is a good student," she said. "Very responsible. That's why this surprised us." Lena spoke before Adrian could. "I didn't steal them," she said. "And I didn't lie. I asked." He said yes. The room fell quiet. Adrian felt something shift, not just in the principal, but in himself. This girl carried her truth like armor. "I'm paying him back," Lena added, opening her backpack and pulling out the notebook. She placed it carefully on the desk. "I wrote it down." The principal studied the pages, her expression softening despite herself. "You shouldn't have to do this," she murmured. "But I want to," Lena said. "I don't want free things. I want fair things." Adrian watched the exchange, realizing that whatever he thought he had given Lena yesterday, she had already returned it with interest. After a moment, the principal sighed. "There's no punishment," she said. "We only needed clarity." Lena relaxed visibly. Adrian placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Thank you for taking the time," he said. As they left the office, a teacher stepped out of a nearby classroom and froze when she saw Adrian. Recognition flashed across her face, followed by something like embarrassment. "Mr. Hale," she said. "I didn't realize." "It's all right," Adrian replied. "You didn't know." She hesitated. "Lena, she's very talented. She just needs stability." The word lingered with him long after they walked away. Outside, Lena exhaled deeply. "That wasn't so bad," she said, though her hands were shaking. "You were very brave," Adrian told her. She shrugged. "I'm used to explaining myself." They stood at the gate again, the same place where their paths had crossed, yet everything felt altered. "I have to go," Lena said. "My uncle will be waiting." "Your uncle?" Adrian asked. "Yes, at the cafe. He doesn't like when I'm late." Adrian nodded, then hesitated. "Lena, can I ask you something?" She looked up at him. "Yes." "Why school shoes?" he asked. "Why not food or money?" She considered the question carefully. "Because shoes decide where you're allowed to stand," she said at last. "Without them, they don't let you inside." The simplicity of the answer left him speechless. She waved and turned to leave, then paused. "I didn't forget," she said. "I'll bring the first $5 next month." "I know you will," Adrian said. As he watched her walk away, a familiar unease crept back in, but this time it was different. It wasn't fear of loss or failure. It was the sense that by stepping into Lena's life, he had opened a door he could no longer close. And somewhere, beyond the school gates and the cafe and the worn streets, forces were already moving people who would not see Lena's promise as innocence, but as opportunity. The cafe was smaller than Adrian expected, tucked between a laundromat and a closed electronics shop, its windows fogged from steam and simmering oil. He had followed Lena at a distance she didn't notice, unsure why his feet carried him there when his mind insisted he should leave. Through the glass, he saw her slip behind the counter, tie an apron around her waist, and transform. The careful, formal girl from the school gate became efficient, fast, her hands moving with the confidence of someone who had memorized every inch of the place. A man stood near the register, broad-shouldered, his face carved with permanent exhaustion. Lena leaned up to speak to him, and he nodded without smiling. Adrian guessed this was the uncle. There was no cruelty in the man's posture, but no softness either, only survival. Adrian stepped back, telling himself he had seen enough. Yet as he turned, his phone buzzed again. This time it was not an unknown number. It was his assistant, Mara. "You're trending," she said without preamble. "I'm in the middle of something," Adrian replied. "You're always in the middle of something," she said. "But this someone posted a photo of you outside a school this morning. It's spreading fast." His stomach tightened. "What kind of photo?" "You standing next to a little girl. Comments are already guessing. Some are kind. Some are not." Adrian closed his eyes. He could picture it clearly now, the ripple he'd sensed finally breaking the surface. "Contain it," he said. "No statements yet." "Adrian," Mara warned, "silence gets interpreted." "So does noise," he replied, and ended the call. Across the street, Lena carried a tray of cups to a table. One slipped. She caught it just in time, biting her lip. The uncle glanced over sharply, then looked away. Adrian felt an impulse dangerous and irrational to intervene, to smooth a world that was not his. He forced himself to walk away. That evening, his penthouse felt unusually hollow. The walls were glass, the city glittering below like something owned. He poured a drink, didn't touch it, and instead sat with the lights off. Notifications flooded his phone. Articles. Speculation. Old photos resurfaced, narratives bending to fit whatever angle suited the writer. Billionaire's secret child? One headline teased. He shut the screen off, jaw tight. For the first time in years, money felt clumsy, unable to solve the shape of the problem. His mind returned to Lena's notebook, to the care with which she'd written each number. He wondered if she knew what attention could do, how it could crush as easily as it could elevate. The next week passed in fragments. Adrian sent someone discreet to check on the school, nothing intrusive, just enough to ensure Lena wouldn't be singled out. But the attention grew anyway. A local reporter showed up at the gate. Parents whispered. Children stared. Lena called him that Friday. "They asked me again," she said. "Who?" Adrian asked, already standing. "People with cameras. They said you're famous." He exhaled slowly. "Did you talk to them?" "No," she said. "I told them I was late." A pause. "Are you mad?" she asked. "No," he said quickly. "I'm worried." "I'm okay," Lena insisted. "But my uncle says I shouldn't talk to you anymore." The words landed heavier than he expected. "And what do you think?" "I think promises don't disappear just because people are loud," she said. "But I also don't want to cause trouble." Adrian leaned against the window, watching traffic flow like veins of light. "You're not causing trouble," he said. "Other people are." "But trouble still comes," she replied softly. He had no answer for that. The following Monday, the cafe was closed. A handwritten sign on the door read, "Closed for inventory." Adrian stood across the street longer than necessary, unease gnawing at him. He tried Lena's number. No answer. He tried again later. Still nothing. By evening, he had broken his own rule. He sent Mara. She returned an hour later with a file and a look Adrian hadn't seen before. "The uncle," she said. "He's not just struggling. He owes money. A lot of it." Adrian's hands curled into fists. "To who?" "People who don't like delays." Silence stretched between them. Adrian felt a familiar coldness settle in one he knew how to navigate far too well. "Where's Lena?" "Still living above the cafe. For now." "For now," Adrian repeated. That night, he dreamed of shoes lined up in rows, each pair a door. Some were locked. Some led nowhere. One pair, small and scuffed, stood alone at the end of the hall. The next morning, Lena finally called. Her voice was hushed. "Sir, Mr. Adrian?" "Yes," he said immediately. "Where are you?" "At home," she said. "But I might not go to school today." "Why not?" "My uncle says we may have to leave," she said. "Just for a while." "Leave where?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I put my notebook in my bag." The image hit him hard, a child preparing for disappearance by packing a promise. "Lena," he said carefully, "listen to me. I need you to do something." "Yes." "Don't go anywhere without telling me first." There was a long pause. "Are you going to be angry?" "No," he said. "I'm going to help." Another silence, heavier, more fragile. "You already did," she whispered. "You gave me shoes. I can stand." Adrian closed his eyes, realizing too late that standing was not always enough when the ground itself was shifting beneath you. The silence after Lena's words stretched longer than Adrian expected, not because the line had gone dead, but because neither of them seemed to know how to step forward without breaking something invisible. Outside his window, the city carried on as if nothing fragile existed within it. "Where is your uncle right now?" Adrian finally asked. "At the cafe," Lena said. "He's talking to men in the back. He told me to stay upstairs." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Did he tell you why?" "No. But he told me to keep my shoes on. He said if we have to run, broken feet slow you down." Adrian felt a cold, precise anger settle into his chest. "Lena, listen to me carefully. If anyone tells you to leave suddenly, or if you feel scared, you call me immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes," she said. "I saved your number under promise." He swallowed. "Good." After the call ended, Adrian didn't wait. He didn't call lawyers or advisors. He put on a jacket, left the penthouse, and drove himself something he hadn't done in years. The streets blurred past as memories surfaced uninvited, a smaller version of himself learning which alleys to avoid, which men not to look at too long. When he reached the cafe, two unfamiliar cars were parked out front, engines idling. Adrian didn't hesitate. He walked inside. The air was thick with tension and frying oil. Lena's uncle stood behind the counter, his shoulders rigid. Two men sat at a corner table, their faces unreadable, their hands empty but relaxed in a way that suggested they didn't need weapons to feel dangerous. One of them looked up. "We're closed," he said. Adrian met his gaze evenly. "I'm here to speak with the owner." The uncle turned, eyes widening for a fraction of a second before narrowing. "You shouldn't be here," he said under his breath. Actually, one of the men said, standing slowly, this might be perfect. Adrian felt the shift instantly, the recognition dawning. His name didn't need to be spoken. Power, he had learned, announced itself quietly. You owe money, Adrian said, not as a question. The man smiled thinly. Business is business. So is timing, Adrian replied. And you've chosen a bad one. The room stilled. The second man leaned back in his chair, studying Adrian with new interest. You think money makes you untouchable? No, Adrian said. I think it makes you predictable. The uncle stepped forward, panic edging his voice. Please, just leave. This has nothing to do with her. Adrian didn't look away from the men. Everything has to do with her, he said. That's why I'm here. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Adrian knew without seeing her that Lena was listening. He raised his voice slightly, not in threat, but in certainty. Whatever arrangement you think exists here, consider it finished. The first man laughed. And who's going to finish it? I am. Phones appeared in hands. Calls were made. The balance of the room tilted. 10 minutes later, the men left without another word, their confidence replaced by calculation. The uncle sank into a chair, shaking. You don't understand, he said. They'll come back. Adrian turned to him. Not here. Not ever. And what do you want in return? The uncle asked bitterly. People like you don't save people like us for free. Adrian considered the man not with judgment, but with clarity. I want Lena to go to school, he said. Every day. Without fear. The uncle looked away. Fear doesn't disappear just because someone pays it off. No, Adrian agreed. But it does change shape. A small figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Lena stood there, clutching her backpack, shoes firmly tied. Adrian looked up and gave a small nod. She came down slowly, eyes darting to her uncle, then back to Adrian. Are we leaving? She asked. No, Adrian said. Not today. The uncle covered his face with his hands. I can't protect her, he whispered. I never could. Adrian knelt in front of Lena, lowering himself to her eye level. Do you trust me? He asked. She hesitated. Trust, to her, was not a word, it was a measurement. Finally, she nodded. Yes. Then I need you to be brave again, he said. Not forever. Just for now. What does brave mean? She asked. It means letting help last longer than one moment. That afternoon, Lena didn't go back upstairs. Adrian drove them both to a quiet building with high windows and a garden that looked out of place in the city. A woman met them at the door, her smile warm but professional. This is temporary, Adrian said to Lena. Just until things settle. Will my uncle be okay? She asked. Yes, Adrian said. And you'll see him. She nodded, then looked down at her shoes. I didn't bring my notebook. Adrian crouched again. You don't need it right now. But I owe you, she insisted. You owe the world your future, he replied. That's enough for today. As the door closed behind her, Adrian stood alone for a moment, the weight of what he'd done pressing in. He knew this was not an ending. It was an escalation. He had stepped fully into Lena's life now, and the world would notice. His phone buzzed. Mara's name flashed on the screen. You need to see this, she said as soon as he answered. The story changed. They're calling you a savior. Others are calling you a manipulator. And someone just leaked documents about your past. Adrian closed his eyes, the garden rustling softly behind him. Somewhere inside the building, Lena was unpacking a bag, counting on promises to hold. And far beyond the city, Forces that cared nothing for shoes or children were beginning to circle. Adrian didn't open the documents right away. He stood there longer than necessary, watching the leaves in the small garden move as if nothing in the world had shifted. The building behind him was quiet, the kind of quiet designed to feel safe, but safety had a sound to it, one he knew too well, and this place hadn't earned it yet. "What kind of documents?" he asked finally. "Old ones," Mara replied. "Selective ones." "About the company?" "About you," she said. "About where you came from. About things you didn't do but that look convincing when taken out of context." Adrian exhaled slowly. "How bad?" "Bad enough that people will start asking why a man like you is suddenly interested in a poor child." His grip tightened around the phone. "People always ask why. That doesn't mean they deserve answers." "They'll demand them anyway," Mara said. "And Lena will be dragged into it whether we like it or not." At the mention of her name, Adrian turned back toward the building. "Then we move carefully," he said. "No statements involving her. No photos. No leaks." "That may not be possible anymore," Mara warned. "Someone already knows where she is." The words sliced cleanly through him. "Who?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But the interest is growing, and not all of it is public." Adrian ended the call and stepped inside. The woman who had greeted them earlier looked up from the desk. "She's settling in," she said softly. "She asked if she could keep her shoes on." Adrian nodded. "That's fine." He was shown to a small room with a single window. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, backpack at her feet, hands folded in her lap as if waiting for instructions. She looked up when he entered. "Is this like a hotel?" she asked. "In some ways," Adrian said. "But quieter." She nodded, absorbing the information carefully. "Will I go to school from here?" "Yes." "And my uncle?" "You'll see him," Adrian repeated. "Soon." She seemed satisfied with that, though her eyes lingered on the door after he spoke. "People talk about you," she said suddenly. "I know. They say you're powerful." He smiled faintly. "They say a lot of things." She considered him for a moment. "Are you powerful enough to stop people from lying?" The question landed harder than any accusation. Adrian sat in the chair opposite her. "No," he said honestly. "But I can make sure lies don't decide everything." She nodded again, as if adding that to her internal map of how the world worked. "That's still a lot." That night, Adrian didn't leave. He stayed in a guest room down the hall, waking at every sound. Once, close to dawn, he heard soft footsteps and opened his door to find Lena standing there, backpack slung over one shoulder. "I thought it was morning," she whispered. "Not yet," he said gently. She hesitated. "I dreamed my shoes disappeared." "They're still here," he said. "I promise." She looked down at her feet, relief flooding her face before she caught herself and straightened. "Okay," she said. "Then I can sleep again." The next morning brought noise. Not from inside the building, but from the outside world crashing in. Messages stacked up. Share prices wobbled. Commentators argued. Some praised Adrian as a symbol of hope. Others dissected his motives with surgical delight. By noon, a letter arrived addressed to Lena. Adrian read it first. It was polite. Congratulatory. An invitation to appear on a nationally broadcast program focused on extraordinary acts of kindness. "No obligation," it said. "Just a chance to inspire." He folded the letter slowly. When he showed it to Lena, she frowned. "They want me to talk?" "Yes." "About what?" "About shoes," he said. "About promises." She shook her head immediately. "I don't want to." "Why not?" Because if I talk, she said carefully, people will decide what my promise means. And then it won't be mine any more. Adrian felt something in his chest loosen, then tighten again. You don't have to do anything, he said. I know, she replied. But they'll keep asking. Yes, he said. They will. That afternoon, the uncle called. His voice was raw. They took my cafe, he said. Closed it. Said there were violations. Adrian closed his eyes. I'll handle it. No, the uncle said sharply. You already did enough. Too much. Everywhere I go now, people look at me like I'm a story. You are a person, Adrian said. So is she, the uncle replied. And she didn't ask for this. After the call, Adrian sat with the weight of it pressing down on him. He had solved an immediate danger, but consequences were unfolding in layers, each one revealing another vulnerability. That night, he met with people he trusted quietly, off record. Security increased. Routes changed. Names were removed from lists. Still, the sense of being watched grew. 2 days later, Lena didn't come back from school on time. The call came from an unfamiliar number. Adrian answered before it finished ringing. She's safe, a man said calmly. For now. Adrian's world narrowed to a single point. Who is this? Someone who understands leverage, the man replied. You stepped into a narrative that wasn't yours. Now you're part of it. What do you want? Adrian asked. A conversation, the man said. About what you owe. Not money. Influence. The line went dead. Adrian stood perfectly still, phone pressed to his ear long after the sound vanished. Then he moved fast, controlled. Calls were made. Doors closed. Plans shifted. An hour later, Lena walked through the door, pale but unharmed, escorted by a staff member. She ran to Adrian and stopped just short, as if remembering rules she hadn't been told. They asked me questions, she said quietly. Not bad ones, but strange ones. What kind of strange? Adrian asked, kneeling. They asked what I would do if you changed your mind, she said. If you decided not to help any more. Adrian felt a chill creep up his spine. What did you say? I said promises don't belong to moods, Lena replied. They belong to people. He hugged her then, carefully, briefly. That was the right answer, he said, though he wasn't sure there were any left. That night, Adrian stood alone again at the window, city lights flickering like uncertain stars. He understood now that the shoes had never been the point. They were a doorway. And by opening it, he had invited a world that tested promises not by intention but by endurance. Morning arrived without relief. Adrian woke before the sun, already dressed, already calculating distances and risks the way other people counted hours. Lena was still asleep when he checked on her, curled on her side, one hand wrapped around the strap of her backpack as if it were an anchor. He stood there longer than necessary, memorizing the quiet, because experience told him it wouldn't last. By breakfast, the building felt different. Subtle, but unmistakable. Too many people knew too much. A guard lingered near the door longer than protocol required. A car idled across the street that hadn't been there the night before. Adrian ate standing up, phone pressed to his ear. Trace the call, he said quietly. Not the number. The pattern. Mara didn't argue. That worried him more than panic would have. They're not amateurs, she said after a pause. They want you unsettled, not scared. That's worse. Lena appeared in the doorway, shoes on, hair brushed with careful strokes that spoke of discipline rather than vanity. Is today normal? She asked. Adrian looked at her and answered honestly. It's going to try very hard not to be. She accepted that with a small nod. I like school days, she said. They're predictable. Then you'll go, Adrian replied. With company. At school, the air shifted the moment they arrived. Parents stared too long. A teacher whispered into her phone. Lena noticed, of course. She always noticed. She didn't comment, just adjusted her backpack straps and walked forward, shoulders squared. A woman stepped in their path. Expensive coat. Smile sharpened by intention. Mr. Hale, she said. I'm from the foundation. We help children like Lena. Lena's hand tightened around Adrian's sleeve, almost imperceptibly. We're not interested, Adrian said. The woman's smile didn't falter. You should be. People are asking why you alone get to decide what help looks like. People ask many things, he replied. They're not entitled to answers. As they walked past, Lena looked up. She didn't ask me, she said. No, Adrian agreed. She didn't. The day dragged. Meetings collapsed into each other. Calls overlapped. Somewhere between noon and evening, Adrian realized the pressure wasn't random. It was coordinated. Each invitation, each threat, each flattering headline pushed toward the same outcome: control the story or let it consume him. That night, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a pair of children's shoes, old, cracked, unwearable. Tucked inside one was a folded note. Everyone stands somewhere. Choose carefully. Adrian stared at it for a long time before closing the box. Lena watched him from the couch, expression unreadable. Are those mine? She asked. No, he said immediately. She studied his face. They want you to stop helping, she said, not as a question. Yes. She nodded slowly. Because if you stop, the story ends. Because if I stop, Adrian said, they win. She considered that, then surprised him. Then maybe we shouldn't stop, she said. Maybe we should change where we're standing. He looked at her sharply. What do you mean? She slid off the couch and reached into her backpack, pulling out the notebook at last. She opened it to a fresh page. If I pay you back faster, she said, they can't say you owe me. Or that I owe you. Adrian felt something twist painfully in his chest. Lena, this isn't about money. I know, she said. That's why money is the safest thing to use. He knelt in front of her, lowering himself again to her level. You don't have to fix this. I'm not fixing it, she replied calmly. I'm participating. The word hung between them, heavy with understanding far beyond her years. The next day, the first protest formed outside the building. Small. Loud. Signs accusing Adrian of exploitation, of savior complexes, of secrets yet to be revealed. Lena watched from the window, silent. They're angry, she said. Yes. Angry people don't listen. No, Adrian agreed. But they watch. By the end of the week, the pressure peaked. An ultimatum arrived disguised as an offer. Step away publicly, let others take over Lena's care, and the attacks would stop. His past would stay buried. His company would stabilize. Mara laid it out bluntly. They're giving you a way out. Adrian looked at Lena, who was sitting at the table doing homework, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. They're giving me a way to disappear, he said. And her? Mara asked quietly. Adrian didn't answer. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She sat beside him on the floor, back against the couch. If you leave, she said softly, will they leave too? No, Adrian said. They'll just find another angle. She nodded. That's what I thought. She hesitated, then asked, Do you regret it? The shoes. Adrian didn't answer right away. He thought of the first moment, the trembling hand, the vow. No, he said finally. I regret the world that makes shoes this dangerous. She leaned her head against his arm, just for a moment. Then don't let them decide, she whispered. The following morning, Adrian made a call that changed everything. Not to the media. Not to his lawyers. To someone who had taught him long ago that power didn't always need to be loud to be absolute. When he hung up, the city looked the same. But underneath, something had shifted. By evening, word spread that a press conference was coming. Not about charity. Not about accusations. About something older, deeper, something tied to Adrian's past that no one had been able to prove. Lena looked up from her notebook. "Are you scared?" she asked. Adrian met her gaze. "Yes," he said, "but not of losing." She smiled faintly. "Then we're standing in the right place." Outside, cameras gathered. Questions sharpened. Somewhere in the crowd, the people who had made the call waited to see which promise would break first. The press conference room filled faster than anyone expected. Cameras lined the walls, cords snaking across the floor like roots searching for something solid. Adrian stood behind the curtain, listening to the low murmur of speculation swell and fall. Each voice carried a version of him that wasn't quite true, yet powerful enough to matter. Lena waited in a side room with Mara, sitting perfectly still, hands folded over her notebook. "Are they angry?" she asked. "Some," Mara said gently. "Some are curious. Some want to be first." Lena nodded as if that explained everything. First is not the same as right. Mara smiled despite herself. Adrian checked his watch. 5 minutes. He felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the old instinct to control the narrative before it controlled him. This time, he forced himself to let go of that instinct. Control had brought him here. Something else would have to take him further. A staffer signaled. Adrian stepped out. The room went silent in a way that felt practiced. Flashes erupted. Questions rose but didn't yet break free. Adrian waited until the noise settled, until every camera was locked on him. "I didn't call this conference to defend myself," he began, "nor to promote an act of charity." A ripple of confusion passed through the room. "I called it because some stories don't belong to the loudest voices," he continued. "They belong to the people living them." Hands shot up. He ignored them. "There's been a lot of speculation about my motives," Adrian said. "About a child. About a pair of shoes. About why a billionaire would involve himself in something so small." Small. The word tasted bitter. "What you don't understand," he said, "is that nothing is small when it decides who gets to stand inside and who's left out." A murmur spread. Adrian lifted a folder from the podium. "Years ago," he said, "before there was a company, before there was money, there was a boy who didn't have the right shoes. That boy missed school. He learned early that the world doesn't pause for bare feet." The room leaned in. "That boy was me." The effect was immediate. Gasps. A sharp intake of breath from someone in the front row. Adrian let it happen. He opened the folder and placed a photocopy on the podium, a school record, yellowed, stamped with absences. "I wasn't rescued," he said quietly. "No one stepped in. I learned to survive instead. I learned to become untouchable." Cameras clicked faster now. "When a girl asked me for school shoes," Adrian continued, "I didn't see charity. I saw a crossroads. One I remembered standing at." A reporter finally broke through. "Are you saying this is personal?" "Yes," Adrian said. "And that's exactly why it matters." Another voice called out. "What about the allegations? The documents released yesterday." Adrian met the reporter's gaze. "They're real," he said. "And incomplete." A wave of shock rolled through the room. "They show a version of my past without context," Adrian said. A version where survival looks like guilt. I won't deny where I came from. I won't apologize for escaping it. The questions came faster now, overlapping, urgent. Adrian raised a hand. I'm not stepping away, he said clearly. Not because I enjoy attention. Not because I need redemption. But because I refuse to teach a child that promises dissolve under pressure. The room erupted. Some applauded. Others shouted. Adrian stepped back from the podium, signaling the end. Behind the curtain, Mara grabbed his arm. You just escalated everything. I know, Adrian said. You confirmed the past, she said. They'll dig deeper. Let them, he replied. I'm done hiding. Across town, Lena watched the live broadcast on a small screen. She listened carefully, eyes never leaving Adrian's face. When it ended, she closed her notebook and exhaled. He stood, she said. Mara turned to her. Yes, he did. That night, reactions poured in like rain after drought. Support surged from places Adrian hadn't expected: teachers, former students, people who remembered being left out for reasons they couldn't control. But backlash came too. Threats sharpened. Allies grew nervous. By morning, a formal notice arrived. A hearing. Child welfare. Oversight committees. Words that sounded protective but carried teeth. They're pushing for guardianship review, Mara said. They want to determine if you're a suitable influence. Lena looked up. I don't need a guardian, she said. I have an uncle. Mara hesitated. They may question that too. Adrian felt the familiar cold settle in again, but this time it didn't freeze him. It focused him. Then we prepare, he said. And we tell the truth. All of it. The hearing was set for a week later. 7 days of waiting, of watching headlines twist, of measuring footsteps in hallways. Lena kept going to school. She kept paying attention. She kept her shoes spotless. One afternoon, she handed Adrian 5 crumpled dollars. My first payment, she said. He stared at the bills. You don't have to. I know, she said. But I want to. He took them carefully, as if they were fragile. Then I accept, he said. With conditions. She raised an eyebrow. What conditions? That one day, he said, you'll decide what promises mean. Not me. She considered that, then nodded. Okay. The night before the hearing, Adrian couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony, city lights blurring into something softer. Lena joined him quietly. If they say no, she said, what happens? They can't make us forget, Adrian replied. She nodded. Forgetting is worse than leaving. The hearing room was smaller than the press room, but heavier. Officials sat behind long tables, faces neutral. Lena sat beside Adrian, feet barely touching the floor, shoes perfectly tied. Questions came. About intent. About influence. About money. One official leaned forward. Do you understand, she asked Lena, that powerful people sometimes help in order to control? Lena didn't look at Adrian before answering. Yes, she said. And do you feel controlled? Lena thought carefully. No, she said. I feel seen. A pause. Another official spoke. And what happens if Mr. Hale changes his mind? Lena opened her notebook, flipped to a page, and held it up. Then I still have my promise, she said. And my shoes. The room went quiet. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest, not pain this time, but awe. He realized then that whatever the outcome, something irreversible had already happened. Lena was no longer standing alone at the edge of the world. The hearing adjourned without a decision. Deliberation, they said. Time. As they left, a man Adrian didn't recognize brushed past him and murmured, This isn't over. Adrian didn't stop walking. Lena kept pace beside him, step steady, shoes striking the floor with quiet certainty. Outside, cameras waited. Questions hovered. The world leaned in, eager to see which promise would finally bend. And somewhere in that waiting, the ground shifted again, preparing to test not just Adrian's resolve but Lena's belief that standing was only the beginning. The decision came on an ordinary morning, delivered in an envelope so plain it felt almost insulting after everything that had led up to it. Adrian held it for a long moment before opening it, as if weight alone could tell him the outcome. Lena stood across the room, shoes on as always, backpack ready, eyes calm in a way that made his chest ache. They ruled there would be no change in guardianship. No forced separation. No transfer of care. Lena would remain with her uncle, with protections in place, oversight strict but fair. Adrian would not be removed from her life, but his role would be clearly defined, transparent, and voluntary. The system, after all its noise, had chosen caution over control. Lena listened quietly as Adrian explained it in simple words. When he finished, she nodded once, then asked, "So we all stay standing?" "Yes," Adrian said, voice rough. "We do." She smiled, then not wide, not dramatic, but real. The kind of smile that settles instead of explodes. "Good," she said. "I don't like starting over." News spread fast, but it landed differently this time. The outrage softened into reflection. The accusations lost their sharpest edges. People moved on, as they always did, toward the next story demanding their anger. But something lingered beneath the surface, something harder to dismiss. The cafe reopened a month later, quieter than before, but steadier. The uncle worked slower now, with less fear in his eyes. Lena returned to school without whispers trailing her steps. She gave her presentation at last, standing at the front of the class, shoes planted firmly on the floor. It was about promises. She didn't mention Adrian by name. She didn't need to. She spoke about how promises weren't magic words, but decisions repeated every day. How they weren't proven when things were easy, but when they were inconvenient. Her teacher watched with tears she didn't wipe away. Adrian attended from the back, unnoticed, for once grateful for it. Months passed. Seasons shifted. Lena kept paying him back $5 at a time despite his protests. He accepted every bill, storing them in a drawer he never opened, because they weren't money anymore. They were milestones. The media called less often. When they did, Adrian declined interviews. He funded schools quietly instead, shoe programs without press releases, scholarships without his name attached. It wasn't guilt driving him. It was clarity. One evening, Lena sat beside him on the steps outside the cafe, counting her change. "I think I'm almost done," she said. "With what?" Adrian asked. "With paying you back," she said seriously. He smiled. "And then?" She shrugged. "Then I'll owe the world." "That's a big debt," he said. "I know," she replied. "But I have good shoes now." Years later, when Lena was taller and her shoes no longer needed careful tying, she stood on a different stage. This one was larger, brighter, filled with people who listened because they chose to, not because they were curious. Adrian watched from the audience, hands folded, heart full in a way success had never managed to fill. She spoke about access, about dignity, about how sometimes the smallest things decide the biggest futures. She told a story about a man who didn't give her everything just enough to stand. When she finished, the room rose in applause. Adrian didn't clap at first. He simply watched, eyes wet, understanding at last what she had given him in return for a pair of shoes. She found him afterward, laughing, radiant. "I think," she said, "I finally paid you back." He shook his head. "No," he said softly. "You paid me forward." They walked out together into a city that still wasn't fair, still wasn't gentle, but one that now carried a quiet reminder that promises could survive noise, power could kneel, and sometimes the most world-shaking revolutions began with a barefoot child asking not for charity, but for a chance to stand.